Hi, everyone. This is Joshua Hoffman, and welcome to another episode of the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast, where we deconstruct the why and how agency owners found their success and discuss a few things they learned along the way. Today, I have Ren Agarwal, the CEO of StoryAZ, a content studio that helps clients strategize, write, and edit content from A to Z. Welcome, Ren.
Thank you, Josh. Good to be here.
And we were talking a little bit right before this call about your amazing bookshelf. So anyone that's not watching the video, Ren might have the best bookshelf of any guest that we've had so far. And you already know, and if anyone else listened to any other episodes, they'll know that we'll get to that at the end. But where I want to jump right into is actually your past company that you started, which was called Mercury 360. And to my understanding, or I guess you were actually kind of sharing some of this, that it actually you got a little bit burnout towards the end. So can you actually talk a little bit more about that and maybe how you think that you can avoid it in the future?
Yeah. Mercury 360 was a social media management agency that I co-founded in 2013. And I had just come out of being CMO at a SaaS company here in Silicon Valley and had faced this issue where social media was really coming to B2B marketing, and we had to figure out how to manage it. I don't think we did it particularly well on the team, but we did the best that we could with all of the other priorities that we had. And so I started Mercury 360 with kind of this idea to create a double bottom line business. And what that essentially means is that we were using kind of a commercial model to also kind of hire and train folks that were overlooked in digital marketing. And we wanted to really kind of create opportunities for people. And so, it was kind of a non-standard agency. We spent a lot of time not only in training staff, but in looking for staff that didn't fit kind of your cookie cutter, if you would, resume from the standpoint of digital marketing. And so imagine that, right? So that's a backdrop. We're doing both training and we're kind of hiring folks that aren't digital marketers, and we're marketing and selling this product, which in 2013, 10 years ago, businesses are getting used to the idea that they need to be more active on social media and they need to be managing it. And so it was a lot, to kind of handle and to do. I think we did really well. We had clients. We kind of grew our staff, but it was my really my first major entrepreneurial venture, and that came with a lot of things that were new to me, a lot of things that I had to shoulder. That over a course of 3 years became a lot.
Was there a moment that you felt like, okay, this is too much, I need to make a different move? And yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah. I think from, they say when you do a startup, right, it's like you've got these milestones. You've got a 1 year, a 3 year, and a 5 year. And that's kind of really what I was managing to. So we got past the 1 year mark. We had staff on board. We had clients. Then it was time to get to the 3 year mark and really assess how we were doing as a business, what our growth prospects look like, whether our clients were happy with what we're doing, whether our staff were happy, and whether we had more runway to kind of go. So it was really at that 3 year mark where kind of I took stock of how hard we were running, how hard I was running, how much effort I was putting into it, how much time it was taking away from family. And it's like when you start an agency, for folks that have done this, and you've come out of the corporate side, whether it's working for a corporate agency or working as I was for a technology company, it's very, very different. The resources aren't there, the different functional expertise may not be there, and you're trying really hard, you're running really hard to grow, and to put all those things in place that you remember from all of your corporate experience. And at that point, I probably had 20 years of experience working at in a variety of companies in the Valley, and so it was really at that 3-year mark where kind of I took stock. Interestingly, when I talked to our board and our advisors and talked to my wife, um, they all said, keep going. You've hit the 3-year mark, which is a really important milestone. It's what you wanted to do. You've got clients. Yeah, you may not have as many as you want. You've got staff there that are staying and that are excited about what you're doing. So I was really counseled to keep going, but it was really at that 3-year mark, to answer your question, where I said, I think I'm burned out.
What did you either expect differently at that 3-year mark, or what did you? Is there anything that would have been different that you would have said, okay, yes, let's keep going?
Yeah. Well, what I had tried to do was bring on managers. So I tried to bring in kind of like director level people, even VP level folks that could come in and help with things like client management, deliverables management, right, staff management, and we tried a couple of folks, but when you're a small agency and you really have to think very entrepreneurial. You have to be extremely flexible and elastic in your approach, and it's tough to find folks that if they haven't been entrepreneurs, if they don't have the entrepreneurial mindset, it can be very difficult for folks to kind of come in and have to bear additional perhaps responsibilities or work in a very different way than what they're used to. And so that was the things that I was trying to do to augment our operations, because I was starting to feel like I can't be doing all of these things. That's just not scalable.
So was it that, I guess, you didn't accomplish? I don't. Well, had you found the right people that may have taken a lot off your plate, do you think that you would have kept going?
I think that would have helped, because being an entrepreneur in an agency where it's a very flat organization, it's both burdensome and I'll be honest, it's very lonely. You spend a lot of time thinking about major decisions on your own, and you at that point you also don't know how to use your board. You don't know how to use your advisors effectively, and that was certainly the case for me. I didn't, even though I was having regular meetings. I wasn't at a point where I could actually share some of the burdens, psychological, emotional, that you're going through. You let's say you lose a client, which we did, right? It's a big client, or a client doesn't renew for whatever reason because they've decided to go a different route. That takes a toll on you. How do you share that? And the right thing to do as entrepreneurs learn, and I'm learning on my second venture now, is that you have to share that. You have to share the good, as my parents would always say, and you have to share the bad. And it kind of relieves that burden.
Last question on this, I promise. And maybe you've already kind of answered it already, but do you have any ways of avoiding now burnouts in your next venture?
Yes. So many ways. Let me tell you, so many ways. I will say that one of the things that I've gotten much better at is that, especially at the start of a venture, to not. One of the things that I do is I don't spend all of my time on that venture. So I spend 50% of my time on the venture when I started off. What that allowed me to do was not get so fixated when things weren't moving as fast as I wanted them to, or move in the direction that I wanted them to. So kind of constraining how much of your life the venture takes on has been a really good solution for me. Somebody very close to me calls it a life hack, that I've personally figured out how to continue life while I'm starting up this new project. So that's really big. That's a really big thing for me. The second thing is, I've set my expectations differently. When you come out of a company that's already established, it's got infrastructure, it's got people, you immediately think that's where you need to go. So my first venture, a barometer for me, a key indicator for success was how many staff did we have, and were we able to kind of support that staff. And now I've got a entirely different indicator that I use, which is really just more in terms of how many new clients do we want to bring on, and I'm looking at that more as a marker of success. And also, in the post-pandemic era that we're all working in, you don't need physical infrastructure anymore. And you'd be surprised at how kind of difficult it can be to kind of come into a physical office every day, and kind of have to, be the face of joy and success for your team. You have to be on all the time. The really nice thing about having a virtual company now is that you can have video calls with folks, and you can be on during those video calls. But then other times, you don't always have to be on. You can relax. You can go take a walk, go have a cup of coffee at the local cafe, and talk to some other entrepreneurs that are going through similar things. So that interestingly has kind of alleviated some of the burden.
Very interesting. Are there any other metrics that you used to put a lot of weight into that now seems more like a vanity metric? I don't know if that's necessarily what you were saying about the employees, but maybe it is. So can you kind of expand that? And is there any other metrics that maybe, an early stage someone that's just starting their marketing agency, they're putting a lot of weight into this one metric, and you've kind of identified that as a vanity metric now?
I think that's a really good thing to call it a vanity metric, because we think these metrics become important for us, and they're really not. I'll tell you another metric that I don't really care about now is revenue. Because, the thing that business people know is that it takes time to build a business. And it takes time because, it takes time for your brand to get out there, for people to kind of kick the tires, to come to your website, to hear about you. Sometimes clients have to go back and kind of experience the pain themselves a little bit, and then they come back and say, we'd like to talk to you about this. We've tried to do it ourselves and it didn't work. So the revenue will come, and the other infrastructure will come. But if you fixate too much on that, then you become all about growth as opposed to sustainability. So the thing that I think about now is, okay, how many clients do I want to get in a year? I don't even think about the value or the size of the client, because what I'm thinking now is, okay, I want to get 3 clients in a year. I then want to spend the requisite amount of time, energy, and resources to make those clients happy, so that in the following year, all 3 clients come with us, and then we'll add 3 more clients. And so, as a business person now who's kind of getting seasoned in this area of starting businesses, it really is about customer success and customer satisfaction that I'm most focused on, and not on revenue, not on the number of employees, not even on profitability. Because if you can break even, year over year, and as you get more clients, well, then you'll scale, and your margins, even if they stay at the same percentage, will throw off more cash that'll allow you to do things like invest or hire more people if you want, things like that.
That was great. I think things like taking the wrong customer just because you want that revenue, which on this podcast we've heard numerous times, does not end up well. Even though when you're itching and scratching in the beginning, you think that every dollar is something you have to take. And I wish I had the stats on this, but at the end of the day, it's easier to keep a client than to find a new client. So I think that's kind of a little bit in your answer as well. I want to go back to your CMO days, since you've mentioned it a few times. And the question there is, what do you think is the biggest learning curve from, going from a CMO to starting your own agency?
Yeah. There's several, that I can think about. CMO, particularly at a technology company, can sometimes become kind of a war of wills between a CMO and the head of sales, chief revenue officer, whatever title you want to get, and it's because marketers sometimes feel like we're putting all this effort in, but it's not being recognized, right? And especially because one of your key stakeholders in an organization is your sales department, in marketing, and you get a lot of feedback from sales, and marketers sometimes feel like, well, what does sales know about marketing, right? We know what we're doing. We're kind of putting all of these strategies in place, and we're executing really well, and look at all these leads that we've brought in. But the thing that you have to recognize is the pressures that each one of the departments are under. And once you walk, as they say, a mile in the other person's shoes,
Mm-hmm.
It really helps to clarify things and makes you, I think, a much more collaborative business person as you begin to kind of understand the complexity of kind of what's involved with running the organization. So, and I would say that, the more time you spend in the seat as a CMO, you do begin to kind of understand that. But when you start an agency, it's like you understand it day one, the importance of prioritizing what marketing is doing, and prioritizing it both in terms of executing the strategy of the organization, because marketing is about more than just leads, but also making sure that revenue attainment, is really kind of one of the core metrics that you're measuring yourself on, that you are being very transparent about, and really collaborating with your vice president of sales. Because the very interesting thing here is that your clients now are, really, really tough. They've got goals, and sometimes you're not even privy to all of the goals that they're being measured on. And so you have to very quickly understand, what does your client need from you? So in our case, it's StoryAZ Studio, right? We're a content marketing agency, so we're developing content. But it's really important for us to understand, well, how are our clients using that content? And how are they going to measure the success of it? The contract might say you're going to generate X number of pieces. But maybe what the client is really interested is in something different. How much traffic does that piece get? Or what does the sales organization say about the content that you've written? Or does the CEO like the thought leadership pieces that you're writing for her? So I think you become smarter as an agency owner to very quickly partner with your client and begin to really understand what their metrics are that they care about.
I love that. I want to double click on that a little bit. Obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but things like marketing and sales and advertising and biz dev and client success, they're all in the same boat, but it's a very big boat that sometimes they don't even need to talk to each other. Obviously, it's more beneficial to talk to each other. So I guess, do you have any kind of like best practices or any ways of making sure that those aren't siloed and really talking and working together properly?
Yeah. I think, having shared metrics is really important. And, and one of the things that I've done is create kind of a tree, if you will, kind of like a organizational hierarchy tree or information architecture for a website. And at the very top is, what's the key metric? And then what are the components of that metric? And if you take a look at a metric such as revenue or profitability, there are various components of that. So profitability has a component of cost. It has a component of margin. It has a component of revenue, of recurring revenue even. And each department or each person on the team is directly responsible for the expense piece of it or the margin piece of it, and if each person on your executive team or your managers, they can kind of understand what they're plugging into, it'll help them. But it's not the only metric you measure them on, right? Because you don't want your sales organization just worried about revenue or just worried about margin, right? It has to be both of those. It has to be the quality of the business in addition to the quantity of the business. And I think that with those components in place and kind of rolling up to the way that the agency will be successful, I think that really helps folks so they know how they're contributing. And then, of course, if you've got um, folks on the team that are there for the right reasons that are aligned with the organization, right? That becomes really important. So if you have folks that really want to kind of help build something, they're going to be looking a little bit more medium to long term. So any incentives that you have in place have to very much align with the overall mission and direction of the agency.
I love that. Now I will actually take a few steps back. We kept going deeper and deeper, and it was great, and I loved it. I'll take now a couple steps back, and can you just tell us a little bit more about your agency and how it started?
Yeah. Um, so I seem to be I seem to have this pattern, right? So I was um, CMO at an organization, and I was kind of coming out of that organization, and I had this epiphany. It was literally, I wasn't actively thinking about it, but the epiphany that I had was that um, the challenge that companies are presented with today is that there's a lot of disintermediation happening, and I borrow this term from financial services. And the idea of disintermediation is that there used to be like a middle layer that helped translate technology, products, and services through reviews, through interviewing companies, through publishing articles about companies. And we all know what's happened to the media landscape over the last 2 decades. There's less media outlets. There's less print publications. Everything has gone digital. People's attention spans are less than they used to be in terms of consuming information. Um, so companies now have to get into the business of actually directly speaking to their prospective customers about their products and services. Where before, maybe, Business Week could do it for you, right? Or a particular vertical trade magazine could do it for you. CIO magazine or, PC Week, you name it. A lot of publications that have really lost their viewership over time. However, the buyer journey has fundamentally changed. So there's some really good data out. We've actually written about this at our website that shows that B2B companies are doing a lot of research to develop a short list for vendors that they'll evaluate even before they call the vendor. So the companies put a project team in place. The project team goes out and does research. And they do a variety of research. They sometimes look at analyst reports. They'll certainly do that. But they also go to the company's website and they say, well, what is this company saying about its own products and services? How easy is it to use this product and service? Are there white papers? Are there brochures? Are there testimonials? Or what we call social proof on the website? They'll then go to other third-party sites and say, what are folks saying about this company's products or services? So that's all happening without the company ever being involved with a direct conversation with the prospective customer. However, that company is involved in terms of how they manage content surrounding their products and services. So on their website, is this website navigable? What kind of information do they have? Do they have case studies? Are they talking about what their onboarding process looks like for a complex technology product? Or is it just all features and functionality? And so, understanding that buyer journey becomes really important. So both of these things together, the changing buyer journey and the disintermediation within the media landscape, made me understand how complex the problem is and why content marketing has become so important. But as a CMO, I know how difficult it is to create content. Staff are busy with so many things during the work week. And writing, Josh, in your business, you're a host, you go out and do research, you do editing. you understand kind of how much time it takes to do things with quality in a thoughtful way. And to be able to write on brand with the right terminology, with the right deep insight that your clients will value, that your prospective customers will value, takes a lot of time. But how many companies can actually afford to have, in our case, we've got over 10 writers that work with us. How many companies can afford to have more than one writer? And how much can that writer actually produce? So that becomes a really, really big challenge, especially for a CMO that has to show, value for programs, for investments that marketing is making right away. A common stat that you probably know of is, the average CMO is in the seat for 24 months, something like that on average. That means that as soon as the CMO enters an organization, they have to hit the ground running. And I think that when we've gone out and talked to folks, what they've said is how difficult it is to go and find a contractor and then kind of bring the contractor up to speed and kind of manage the contractor, so and so. So anyway, that's a bit of a longer answer to your question about, why, did I think about starting StoryAZ?
And how did you guys get your first customer?
We got our first customer because we knew our client. We had worked with them. I'd worked with them before, so there was a personal connection there, and that allowed us to tell them what we're doing. And they said, "Gosh, we actually need this because it's the second customer is even more interesting."
That you took my question right from me, and I. First customer is good, but second customer is more important. So run with it, please.
Yeah, well, the second customer came because I had a relationship with a digital agency, and the digital agency said, "Look, our number one problem in recognizing revenue on our projects is that we can't always deliver on content, and it's either because a client will say." Yeah. We've got the client covered. We've got the content covered, and we'll write it and deliver it to you. You keep going forward with kind of building the new website, for example, or designing the website. What ends up happening is staff is really busy, so they can't get to the content. The content doesn't get done. The project is stalled. At that point, you can't recognize revenue. Or the digital agency is working with one contractor or two contractors. So, what the head of the digital agency said to me was, look, if there was a professional organization that does copywriting and content creation, that would be a huge positive for us, a huge gain. We'd be able to execute our projects. We'd be able to do it with quality. We'd be able to recognize revenue. We'd be able to offer additional service lines to our clients. So content is always the core of what marketing does. And that's how we got our second customer.
Yeah, perfect. Somehow you got into my brain there and knew that question was coming. A few questions that I tend to ask a lot of the guests at the end. So the first one is, if you had to teach something to other marketers, what would it be?
I think it would be the importance of building out a messaging architecture. And what exactly is messaging? What are the components of messaging? And especially this idea of how do you position a company? Josh, you and I were talking about, should people go to business school? And I'm a fan, right? I think people should. Maybe not at the undergraduate level, but certainly at the graduate level. If you're planning on wanting to be involved with business, of course, there's a lot of other professions out there as well. But if you go to business school, one of the things you learn about and you spend a lot of time is thinking about strategy, and you learn that there's essentially two ways that a business can compete. One way is through price, and that's a spiral for anybody who's tried to compete on price. Early in my career, I worked at a semiconductor company, and let me tell you, those prices eroded very quickly when you're competing on price, and there's nothing else to distinguish you. And that's for semiconductors, right? And you would think that there would be a lot of things you can distinguish, but at some point with a commodity, you can't. The second way is through product service differentiation, and that is why you need to understand positioning, and positioning is a part of messaging. Because if you can truly get to the core of what differentiates your products and service, well, then you've got a defensible competitive advantage in the marketplace that you can be very successful with as you scale up the organization. But what happens is that in many cases, it's difficult to figure out. It's one of the hardest things to do, actually. It's much easier to talk about promises of what the technology does, or the features, right, or the functionality. But it's very difficult to say, no, this is really where it differentiates us. And then you talk about the benefits to the customer from that point of differentiation.
I loved where you took that. Are you guys hiring any positions right now?
We're always looking for good writers. One of the things that distinguishes our writers is that they all have domain experience in one industry or sector. So you've worked in healthcare and you're also a great writer. So that becomes really important, because I think that that's how we offer value to our clients on day one. That we know the terminology, we've got insights. Of course, there's other things that we have to learn about the business, and we do all of that, on our own. But that domain expertise is really core to creating excellent content.
And last question, I kind of got to this in the beginning a little bit. Any book or podcast recommendations? That can be in marketing, business, it can be fiction, anything you want.
Yeah, great. I am. I'll give you two, if that's okay.
I'm here for 5 if you want to, but two works as well.
Yeah. So one is The 7 Lives of is it Marcus Alameda? It won the Booker Prize last year. It's a Sri Lankan author, and it's a piece of fiction. Obviously, won the Booker. It's a wonderful book. I'm reading it right now.
7 Moons of Miley Almeida.
That's it. That's exactly it. I'm 3/4 through it, but I've stepped away from it a little while. That's why the title has not stuck in my head. But that's a great book. I recommend that. And then the other book that I recommend is a nonfiction book. And this book is called The Master and His Emissary, and it's by Ian McGilchrist. It's one of the most fascinating books I've ever read. And it is about really the right brain, left brain dialogue, and even conflict that has been going on, in us for millennia. But there are things that have caused that conflict to accelerate recently. And I would argue that ChatGPT is one of those. And Ian McGilchrist takes both a kind of a scientific approach to it, as well as kind of a psychoanalytic, psychological approach, a social approach to it. And he really talks about what's happening to us as organisms, as beings. And really some of the things that in our modern technological society we are beginning to compromise that has really profound consequences.
That's interesting. I'm currently in the middle of Sapiens. I don't know if you've read that. And
Yes.
My number one podcast that I'm listening to right now is Huberman. So that almost seems like a Sapiens meets Huberman type book. So you got me on that one. That is very, very interesting. As we come up to the end of the episode, I just want to give you an opportunity to mention how people can find you and anything else you'd like to end with.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Josh. So our website is StoryAZ.studio. You come and learn about us, learn about the content marketing that we do there. You can schedule a meeting directly on the website. You can also, send us an email through the website. Very, very, very easy. And we'd love to talk to anybody about projects or needs that they have. It doesn't matter how small or large. We would be happy to talk to potential folks.
Awesome, Ren. I thought this was, anytime we go over the 30-minute mark on the call alone, it's usually because it's a very good call. And I think this one definitely was. So for those of you who learned something new on this episode, please consider giving us a like or a follow so we can continue getting the highest quality of guests. And always, thank you for listening. Thank you again, Ren.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for listening to the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, DevNoodle. DevNoodle provides marketing agencies with the ability to offer their clients unlimited website design, build, and management services with fixed monthly plans. If website design, development, and maintenance is holding your agency back from growing, please reach out to us at devnoodle.com, where we make websites easy for you and easy for your clients. devnoodle.com.